with breaking news, major developments in a country considered one of the most dangerous in the world to the U.S. And now U.S. Special Forces announcing they're pulling out of Yemen because of the growing chaos, meaning there will be no U.S. presence on the ground there, which could have a huge impact in the fight against ISIS and al-Qaeda. ABC's Alex Marquardt has been tracking all of it. Good morning, Alex.
Good morning, Martha. It's hard to see the situation in Yemen this morning as anything other than complete anarchy in a failed state, a complex web of warring factions that have pushed the U.S. out and created a vacuum that America's biggest enemies are now trying to fill. This weekend, Yemen's growing chaos forcing the U.S. to pull out completely. The State Department saying 100 military trainers and special operations forces have now left. Forces that had remained even after the U.S. Embassy closed last month, eliminating the American presence in a country the Obama administration considers vital for counterterrorism.
We continue to go after high-value targets inside of Yemen, and we will continue to maintain the pressure that's required to keep the American people safe.
But now the unrest in Yemen has reached a new low. The U.S.-backed president has fled the capital. Rebels from the Shiite Houthi tribe, supported by Iran and sworn enemies of the U.S., now in charge, and this morning taking over Yemen's third biggest city. Then, during Friday prayers, suicide attacks that struck two different Shiite mosques, more than 130 people killed. A Sunni jihadist group claiming links to ISIS warning this is just the beginning.
It's unclear how much ISIS has actually been involved in these attacks, but I do think what is clear is that their ideology and their inspiration has impacted several of these attacks.
Yemen's spokesman in Washington tweeting, "I hate to say this, but I'm hearing the loud and clear beating of the drums of war." It was in Yemen that the USS Cole was attacked by al-Qaeda suicide bombers in 2000. 17 American sailors were killed. Then, in 2012, in an operation designed by the Yemen-based al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, the so-called underwear bomber tried to bring down a plane with plastic explosives. Martha Raddatz later touring the school and apartment where he trained. And back here in Tunisia, the government overnight releasing new video of that attack on the National Museum that left at least 21 people dead. Tunisia's president saying this morning a third gunman was involved, but he escaped. That attack, like the ones in Yemen, evidence of ISIS trying to expand their global reach. Martha?
Thanks, Alex. Now, this stunning new threat from a group claiming to represent ISIS, publishing an online hit list with the names, addresses, and photos of U.S. military personnel. The Pentagon is responding this morning, and ABC's Hamish McDonald joins us with the latest. Good morning, Hamish.
Martha, good morning. This is unprecedented. The names and addresses of around 100 U.S. military personnel published online by a group calling itself the Islamic State Hacking Division. And they're calling on their supporters to kill those identified at home in the United States. Now, a Pentagon spokesman has told ABC News that they won't confirm if the details published are correct, but we do know they've been contacting the families of those on the list, mainly Air Force and Navy personnel. On the CENTCOM Facebook page, there is a broader warning saying that there are bad actors out there trying to gain your information for their own benefit and potentially to use it against you. Now, it does not appear that this information was actually hacked from government servers. Officials are saying this morning that most of this information was already in the public domain in places like social media. Martha?
Thanks, Hamish. Let's bring in the chair of the House Homeland Security Committee, Congressman Michael McCaul. Mr. Chairman, I want to go back to Yemen and the dangers there. Can you tell us what the latest intelligence on that situation is?
Well, I think the problem is we're not going to have any intelligence in Yemen. Yemen's one of the most dangerous spots in the world. Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula is the largest external operation force within Al-Qaeda. They are responsible for, you saw on your broadcast, the underwear bomber. 5 plots against the West in the last several years. They were tied to the Khorasan group in Syria to make bombs to blow up airplanes. Now that we pulled our embassy out and our special operations.
And that became because of the chaos. They've taken over the third largest city. The Houthi rebels are everywhere.
Precisely. And now, because we are withdrawing completely, we will have no intelligence footprint or capabilities to monitor what AQAP and ISIS and the Shia militants are doing in the region. And without good intelligence stops plots against the homeland. Without that intelligence, we cannot effectively stop it. That's what I'm most concerned about.
This is what the State Department is saying this morning. We also continue to actively monitor terrorist threats emanating from Yemen and have capabilities postured in the area to address them. It's just not as good.
But it's not in country, and the human intelligence value is not there. And maybe we can launch drone strikes from other countries, but if you don't have that intelligence on the ground, how do you know who to hit and where and when?
We don't even have allies on the ground.
We don't have any allies.
Leaderless, lawless.
And, it's a model from Libya. We pulled out of Libya. Now look what's happened to Safe Haven and Vacuum, ISIS training. militants to hit in Tunisia. And now we got Yemen. All of northern Africa seems to be falling to this power vacuum that is being filled by the terrorists.
And ISIS joining with al-Qaeda, I think it all seems to be blurred anymore.
It is getting more blurry. I know that AQAP is very much fights ISIS. On the other hand, Boko Haram recently pledged their allegiance to ISIS. And I predict you're going to see more and more of this shifting of al-Qaeda affiliates going over to ISIS because they are the game in town. And so I think these developments in Yemen greatly disturb me because of their potential to attack the United States.
And let's talk about what's going on in Iraq. A couple of weeks ago, I was in Baghdad. People seemed quite confident that the Iraqi security forces would be able to retake Tikrit, which then they could go on and do Mosul. But we're seeing that completely stalled.
Yeah, I think it's a matter of leadership and policy. I think that we're not letting the military do their job here. It's a policy of containment, not a policy to degrade and destroy and defeat ISIS in the region. You know, the president, when he launched the airstrikes in Syria, the same day touted Yemen as the model for counterterrorism operations, and that has now imploded. We can't have the same thing happen. We have no intelligence in Syria, which is a major problem. But we have to get more aggressive in taking out ISIS where they exist, and the head of the snake is in Iraq and Syria.
And just on that note, you saw the threats against the U.S. military in this hit list with 100 names on it. They probably compiled that from social media. And yet, do they have the capability to strike those people and their families?
Well, we have the foreign fighters. There are about 30,000 of them, 5,000 Western passports. According to the DNI clapper, 180 have returned or gone to the region, and we have a number that I can't disclose publicly. They're here in the United States. So the foreign fighters, in addition to that, the homegrown violent extremists who can be inspired and radicalized over the internet is what greatly concerns me, to inspire them to attack our military in the United States. And I think, unfortunately, it would be not so difficult to pull off.
Thank you very much for joining us, Chairman McCall. And now joining us, General Carter Ham, retired commander of U.S. Africa Command. General Ham, I want to talk to you about these threats to the family specifically. And you just heard Chairman McCall talk about it could be possible they could carry out those threats. What does that do to a military community?
Martha, this is very disconcerting, obviously, to the families, the specific families that were identified in this release, but more broadly across the armed services, to know that those who engage in social media, that information now can be corrupted and used by a terrorist organization to threaten them. And in worst case, what they hope to do is inspire or motivate someone here in the United States to attack or kill these service members or their families.
And I have to say that last night when this first came out, I went on Facebook to see if I could find those people that they talked about. Very easy to find. The Defense Department has said, clean up your social media. I went on again this morning, and some of those pictures were still public, and those names on Facebook accounts showing they're in the military. I suppose you would say get that off social media as well.
Yes, the Department of Defense has been very active over the past many years of reminding service members and their families to be very cautious about the information that you put on social media, disabling your geolocation, being very circumspect about the location of the service members for precisely the reason that has now played out. And I worry that this increasing sophistication by these Islamic terrorist organizations to manipulate social media to their own ends is a very worrying trend.
And you've got to worry about cybersecurity, too.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you very much for joining us, General.